Bonjour à tous. Welcome to the Nouvel Esprit Podcast. We are your hosts. I'm Guillermo Moreno, and here is.
Jeremy Hossotter.
Charles Maffiati.
And today's topic is what is education? So we're really excited, first of all, to come back onto the podcast episode after a slightly longer time than usual, having been gone. But here we are. And I think the beauty part about what today's topic is the fact that the three of us are educators, and we met in the education realm. I certainly Jeremy and I, and then Charles later as well. We will definitely share our experiences in education. You know, the gift of education in and of itself, and what the what the situation is like today. Is it what education should be oriented to, or has somehow the modern idea of education just completely segued from what education actually is? Now, what we're going to start off with is what's called the classic liberal arts. I know this is something that I wasn't that I did not know about at all. Me, having been raised in the public school system for the longest time up until graduate school, I didn't know that there were other kinds of environments where kids were being educated. I didn't know that there were different cultures. And the classic liberal arts is the perfect place to start because of what it is. Now, I will say that when it comes to the word liberal, to the adjective liberal, it doesn't quite mean, it doesn't mean what we think in, uh, what we think when we think of liberal. So let's go ahead and dissect this term, classic liberal arts. And as I've alluded to before, I'm not very, tragically, I have not been exposed to the great books, for example. So I was wondering if Charles, if you could dissect for us the term classical liberal arts.
I can certainly attempt that. So I might just comment in terms of the curriculum of classical education, which finds its precedence very deep in history, all the way to the very first universities in Europe, Oxford, Paris, Bologna. And the curriculum of these universities was to train the clergy, quite frankly. But one cannot just jump into the Bible. One has to be sort of prepared a certain way, intellectually, according to a kind of curriculum. And the curriculum had two parts, and it's really an extension of the sort of Athenian methods of inquiry, taking Pythagoras's own ideas about education and sort of systematizing that. So by the time we get to the Middle Ages, we have what's called the trivium and the quadrivium. And these are the 7 liberal arts that would prepare one for, let's say, the study of sacred scripture on one hand, and on the other, it would free their minds. So liber, right, liberal arts, artists, these are the arts that make one free. Quite simply, it's free from ignorance. But the trivium is a 3-part foundation of a curriculum that involves grammar and logic and rhetoric. And so the idea, right, is that if someone doesn't know logic, they can't follow an argument. Grammar is the methods in which we control what we write and use punctuation to put constraints on some of that, and also our phrasing. And then rhetoric is the way in which we speak, right? So the idea here is that we're taking letters and forming words from them, and then crafting sentences, intelligible things, and speaking arguments out. This is the foundation of the trivium. The trivium would then prepare one for, let's say, the higher arts, which are 4 in number: the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. And the arithmetic obviously is is number, geometry is the shape or lines and triangles, basic Platonic sort of geometric forms, music, right, which is math and motion, and astronomy, which is the movements of celestial bodies. So that's a long way of saying, Guillermo, that classical liberal arts are in fact classical. They go back very far into history and they reflect a type of curriculum, namely the trivium, the quadrivium.
Now, all right. And one thing that I'm glad that you pointed out was that they started in the first universities of Europe. And okay, was it for the clergy? Yeah, because and at the time, just I think something that we just do take for granted is schools. That we take it for granted. We don't know that, well, we didn't always have this. We didn't always have the sources to teach us to read, write, spell, do arithmetic. And I think we don't realize how widespread ignorance was. And I think how uh that's not normal. Like us not knowing, not having an understanding of the universe, that's just not normal. And it's taken for granted in this day and age. I am curious about who instituted the first universities for the sake of learning about the universe and exercising our ability to reason. In other words, who established these universities, these first universities?
Well, there's certainly evidence that there were universities. I mean, maybe not in the way we would think of them, but
Okay.
higher schools, let's say, in Egypt. Pythagoras, who's a pre-Socratic, who is, what, is sort of a champion of math, right? We learn his Pythagorean theorem to this very day, right? But his own biography in sort of the pre-Socratics would be, there's evidence that he, in fact, went to Egypt and learned some of these, mathematical things or sort of a mathematical logic. They came back to Greece. And so the way in which Euclid is also another example. We study Euclid to this day, right? He learned in schools, right? I mean, but I think that what happens is by the time we get to, and I don't know the personal or the specific details of like the founding of Oxford or the founding of Bologna or the founding of Paris, but once we get there in history, the universities are set up to preserve knowledge, right, and to again instruct capable men to read sacred scripture. That was like the sort of telos of the schools. That was the aim of the schools. Now this is also interesting, if I may. The Ivy League in America originally was set up to train Presbyterian ministers or Protestant ministers. For instance, Harvard was founded as a Bible college, right? Like a lot of these schools are founded as Bible colleges. And so, again, I would just say that to answer your question, which is, not accurate, let's say, but it's just in my mind, it would be people that are interested in spreading the good news of the Bible. They're the ones that put this early curriculum together.
It's ironic considering where the schools ended up today.
Absolutely. Well, and that's the tragic nature of it.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And it's really tempting to go into my experience, at least with the public school education system, how anti-faith it is. I was gonna say, how it's very atheistic, it's very anti-God. I think it's just anti-faith, and I it's weird how I'm finding some kind of a distinction there. What I can confirm, it's very relativistic. yeah, you do you, and there's it doesn't matter because nothing's actually true kind of mindset. Which, okay, well, that does segue into the modern system, how it just ultimately it's an anti-faith environment. And tragically, a lot of even Catholic and I'm not too sure about any Protestant universities. I would imagine so. I would imagine so. Well, yeah, okay, that's where we get the liberal biblical scholars. Yes, these institutions are also uh infected with this anti-faith spirit. I'm not sure what else to call it. Were you gonna say something, Jeremy?
I was thinking about it, but the thought left my mind as I was about to speak.
I'm really sorry. I did see that you were
Yeah.
gonna.
Yeah, no.
The
You have something
point.
to say, Charles? Oh,
No, I was gonna say I hate it when a thought leaves my mind. Um, uh,
Jeremy.
yeah. Oh no, I was quickly gonna say that to respond to Guillermo. Um, this reflects a lot of what we've talked about in maybe on one of our first discussions about positivism and empiricism. And you see this, I, it's almost like you can gauge how good a school is by its philosophy department, right? What is its philosophy department like teaching? What does its philosophy department believe in? And insofar as you negate a philosophy department that is interested in the continental tradition or anything other than analytical philosophy, uh, you end up with a school that only teaches knowledge that can be empirically verified. And so that, that plus, whatever social considerations there are.
yeah. And what's really interesting is when you take that empiricism and then you apply it to the Bible, you get a lot of the liberal tendencies.
Absolutely.
So it's all interconnected, just that worldview.
Mm-hmm.
No,
Yeah, and so and that leads to Guillermo's term of faithless, right? These are
right.
now these schools. First of all, they don't know what faith is. I mean, it's like
Precisely.
right. They haven't struggled with it enough, let alone discuss it. And again, that's part of the tragic nature because a lot of the best schools in the world were started to train people to study scripture and to deal with the things of this life that require faith. And they don't do that.
Yeah. So now I have a question for you. Are you ready?
Yep.
So today we see a promotion of mediocrity within especially high schools at the traditional district schools. What do you think about, I'm just tossing this idea out there, that this empiricistic, this relativistic, faithless worldview leads to mediocrity within the classroom, within these school districts, that teachers just give up on their students, that school administrators just give up on the students. Oh, well, they won't be better. They can't be better.
In my opinion, it's because because the kids. It's hard to care when the kids don't care, but they don't care because they come from environments that don't care. They come from broken homes, and of course, as teachers, there's that. Yes, we're professionals, and at all times we're supposed to have that professional disposition when interacting with our students. At what point do we not do something to serve a student in becoming a better person by accepting and fulfilling their responsibilities? Just it and to teach students good habits, to teach kids good habits.
You see there, Guillermo,
Mm.
that's precisely the problem.
Oh,
The language you just used, good habits,
yeah.
be better. That doesn't make sense. If you're a relativist, empiricist,
Holy smokes.
that's the
Well,
point.
yeah. Hmm.
That's the point.
Oh,
If
well, we have a yeah.
if you accept this kind of worldview that we are dismissing as terrible, as anyone in the right mind should, why should we expect a quote unquote better for our students when there is nothing better according to that worldview? I mean, if you don't have a God, you don't have faith, and everyone is just to do their own thing, why not just have them do their own thing, having fights in the hallways every day?
Well, this inevitably segues into a cultural dilemma. Culturally, we've rejected God.
Yeah,
Yeah, and there's just through so many ways, and of course, at the end of the day, whether it's because of contraception, socialism, pornography, at the end of the day, it's sin.
think
Somehow,
of it this way.
uh,
When you reject God, you reject your basis for respecting other people
sure, absolutely.
because you don't see we lose sight of that focus of treating people as persons, right? Because personhood is fundamentally rooted in the fact that man is created in the image likeness of God. So when we obscure that truth, in some way we obscure the truth of our personhood. And the more our personhood's obscured, the more we will treat other people with mediocrity.
And I want to build off of what you're saying. Maybe it would distort our distortion, and well, okay, you and I, we've talked about this a little bit. I believe off record that
Well, put it
uh,
on the
uh
record then.
yeah, well, that's why no, I hope you're happy. Now I lost my train of thought. It's coming back. That a distorted view of the human person kind of paves the way for us to see just other people in some way, shape, or form as less than human. So remember,
Exactly.
yeah, no, when we talked about my article, the dogs are not children, very, very, very similar situation. At some point, the uh the distorted view of the human person somehow not disintegrated, what's the word, but just lowered the view of the human person down to the level of animals and rose the level of animals up to human.
Yeah. I think a good term for that would be value blindness.
Okay, okay,
Blindness to the value of the human person.
all right, all right. I think at the end of the day, we still acknowledge well, I was going to say we still acknowledge an unborn child as a human person, like culturally, unless it's not wanted, just in a manner of speaking, whatever that means, when no, that's just, and we do see children as equivalent to pets or pets as equivalent to children. See how all of this
Yeah.
is, it's all connected.
Yeah. Especially when you get the weird organic, keto friendly, whatever dog food or the vegan dog food or whatever. Just all
Vegan dog
those
food.
just all those, various adjectives that marketers use to sell people weird food are now being used to apply to pet food and whatnot.
I didn't know that. I figured a dog's a
I
dog.
just made it up with the vegan stuff, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's out there anyways.
I'll check it out next time I go shopping, and I do intend to go shopping very soon.
Oh yeah.
Yes. Now,
I intend to look on Amazon
dog,
vegan dog food.
go for it if you want.
Yeah. But no, it's just the loss of vision we have
Okay.
They're just asinine.
That's the perfect word, asinine. So, okay, and just the modern system of education is not helping in the slightest, and I can't believe how worse it's getting. Where is it
Yeah.
headed? Where is it headed?
And I can confirm vegan dog food is sold on Amazon.com. There are many options, vegetarian and vegan options for dog food.
Sorry, I had to step off for a moment, but it sounds like I got back just in time.
Yeah. So do you have pets, Mr. Marciati?
I don't. I have too many kids.
Would you, if you had a dog, would you feed it vegan dog food?
Um, I don't know. I'd have to pray about it.
Oh yeah,
So
really?
it's a very important decision. I mean, it's come on,
Is it?
it's
I didn't even know that was a thing until 30 seconds ago.
Well, that's what we're here for, to mess with your head.
That's why I'm
although
here.
who knows
That's
how
why-
long it's been around? Who knows how long it's been around?
You know, Mr. Marciati, when you said that you had to pray about it, that reminded me of a story one of my professors, Dr. Roberts at Franciscan, had. Because he talked about how there's a couple of students, and before they went out to Dr. Roberts' house to see about buying a rabbit, right? And so they're looking at the rabbits, and he asked them, "Would you like to buy a rabbit?" And they said, "I don't know. We have to pray about it." And
Nice.
then so they huddled around, they prayed, the students that is, and as they said, "Yes, we think God wants us to buy a rabbit." So Dr. Roberts was like, "Okay, well, what rabbit would you like?" And they said, "Hold on, we have to pray about it." So they huddled around and they prayed.
Nice.
And then they ended up picking a rabbit, and I forget what, but they had to pray about a couple other things while they were there.
Like naming it.
Wow.
And the point Dr. Roberts brought out is just that kind of immaturity and faith in their
Yeah.
faith life is a form of despair.
Wow.
Wait, so
That-
these students, they were not being sarcastic. They actually prayed over these things.
They actually prayed about making every single minor decision of their lives.
Yeah.
See, that's where I think what people who have a distortion of what faith is, they just think faith is superstition. And I
Yeah.
want to be critical. I do believe that a lot of people who go into and out of churches on Sundays have a superstitious disposition. Maybe in some way, shape, or form, just a lot of people do. And I'm not judging anyone specifically. I just can't help but wonder, like,
Yeah,
but that's a different topic. Just
certainly.
coming from my critical perspective.
Or they're just despairing, like Jeremy just said.
Are they? Oh, well, in that case, yeah. In that case, yeah, no, absolutely. It is definitely a spiritual immaturity. And just going back a little bit about just where the modern system is and where it's going.
Yeah. Can I say a bit about that?
Yeah.
So it is the case that modern schooling is following the industrial model, right? Like, kids sitting in a line, one bell rings, they go to another class, another bell rings, they go to another class, or being told what to think, not how to think. And that kind of model is a sort of production line.
Yeah.
And that kind of production line results in a kind of great leveling where not just the form of education, but the way in which these kids are taught does not provide for any kind of originality or deep human formation. It's too fast. It's very cyclical. And what happens is that great leveling combined with, again, fashionable social ideas results in mediocrity. The great leveling, that sort of egalitarian approach to making everyone educated, let's say, that the quest for egalitarianism in education results in mediocrity. And that's a huge problem. Secondly, education, as far as I could tell, in the ancient sense, going a bit back to what we were saying earlier about the classical liberal arts, involves some kind of gymnastic, some kind of body exercise, right? I mean, this is also in Plato's Republic, that the guardian should be strong, exercising gymnastic or something, right? So if that's strength training or endurance, that also helps form a human. And that was my response to Germany's earlier sort of, maybe it wasn't even a question, but it was like, hey, look, no one can be great anymore because everything is the same.
Interesting.
It doesn't provide or allow for the possibility for greatness.
So
Because
then that raises a question then, Charles. So we certainly have this factory model for our education. So how would you remove that so we can have people rise above the mediocrity? How would you rectify the factory model?
well, of course, there's been a lot of suggestions over the years and propositions.
Right.
I think that, for instance, a return to the trivium and the quadrivium, right? So spending a fair amount of time each day teaching kids logic, the fundamentals of grammar, the fundamentals of rhetoric, so they can speak and argue and learn, the foundations. And then, of course, you would, as you graduate into the higher, say the upper schools, right, 6th grade on up, then you can begin a sort of preparation for reading great things, studying arithmetic, learning music, all those, the sort of quadrivium.
Okay.
But
So
I would also just say there's a sort of the way in which we approach a school day should be rethought a bit.
okay.
It
How
should
would
be.
you how would
go ahead.
you rethink a school day? Because I mean, if we just teach the 7 liberal arts, I mean, if we break that up into 7 class periods a day, right there you have something that starts looking like the factory model, because you have to have a bell, some kind,
Sure.
to tell people, oh, time to go to your next class. You see
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah, but I think you could teach the trivium all at once, right? I
Okay.
mean, yeah, you could teach logic, grammar, and rhetoric at the same time. How? By analyzing a passage from a great speech, looking at its grammar, looking at its internal logic, what kind of argument it's making, and then speaking it out loud, learning how to present that, right? So that's all three in one. And that could be done in a seminar method, and that could be done
What is
for
a seminar method?
the seminar method of having these kids sitting around a table, or having young adults sitting around a table ready for a discussion on whatever work we're dissecting.
So
Again, more conversational.
suppose I don't know what you're talking about, Charles. Can you elaborate for me?
Sure. Yeah. Well, that sort of method that I just described is what's known as the Socratic method, where you have people sitting around a table and they're essentially having a conversation, right? They're just discussing, but in a vigorous manner, a text under consideration, a math problem under consideration, a piece of music, analyzing, astronomical movements, and having a discussion about it. That's essentially the sort of conversation approach to teaching.
And I would say, like, for myself, this is my 5th year teaching. I can vouch for the Socratic method as a calculus instructor, because I've been teaching calculus for 5 years now. And the first couple years I think I was heading towards Socratic method without realizing that was kind of direction I wanted to go.
Mm.
And so teaching at my current school has actually helped a lot with my teaching pedagogy, how I approach teaching. and just helping my students turn calculus into a conversation.
Absolutely. That conversation is what's so important. And I think probably the most important text that could substantiate the Socratic method of teaching is the Meno by Plato. So Plato's Meno, right?
Such a classic text.
It was epic.
Epic. And its basic thesis for our listeners is this: that knowledge, that knowledge is not something that you discover outside of yourself. It's something that you recollect from yourself. And what the teacher does is asks you questions such that one can recollect the knowledge that's already there in the student. But again, that's a kind of a laborious task, right? Maybe not. Maybe that's not the right word, but it's a important task, a very serious task.
Yeah. And I think laborious is actually quite fitting, because the Socratic method of the teacher is that image of the midwife helping the student give birth to the truth.
Absolutely.
That's within them. So
Absolutely.
labor is fitting.
Gotcha.
For the Socratic.
That shatters the industrial method.
Oh, certainly.
Now,
go ahead, Guillermo.
Just one little practical concern I have is, and that it's a little, I don't know if it is off topic, so I'll just go ahead and bring it up.
Drop it.
Just the fact that there doesn't seem to be not only sufficient teachers, but sufficient competent teachers, just practically speaking.
Well, you got to remember, Guillermo, you send the people that want to be teachers to these mediocre schools, these faithless schools, and what do they churn out? Mediocre, faithless educators. When you throw a person like that into a classroom and then the students are vicious to you, well, you're going to run away. Because what's going to keep you in that classroom? It can't be the pay. It sucks. Depending on the school, it's not the insurance, because that's going to suck too. What's going to keep you there?
Well, now
you have to be an idealist or a masochist at some point.
But Jeremy, this is why
a Christian. Or a Christian, and just carry this cross.
See there? Idealism at work right there.
Well, look, I think that the conversation could go here. I know we're starting with what is education, but you have to make room, and maybe this is for a different talk. What is a teacher?
Okay.
Exactly.
That is actually where this conversation should land, right?
Exactly.
You can't answer one without the other.
Yeah, and that's actually something I do want to get into at some point before we end this episode.
Fine. No, and because I don't disagree with what you said, Jeremy. It's just, well, I don't know. I think I was just attempting to be a little just optimistic, just because of how dark this conversation has segued.
Oh, I'm just here to be controversial.
No, I think Guillermo has a point. Ultimately, as Catholics, we would agree. We would agree that the greatest teachers are the disciples. Jesus is the greatest teacher, and then his disciples go on and start communities. And even studying St. Paul, for instance, in his letters, that's a whole trivium class right there, if you will, right? You could study the grammar, you could study the logic, and you could study the sort of rhetorical the rhetorical angles, if you will, that Paul uses when he's teaching in the first century. So there is a connection there, but again,
certainly,
again, the question of what is a good, or excuse me, not a good, but what is a teacher? Just period. Or question mark, what is a teacher? What does it mean to teach? And Jeremy, you already mentioned the midwife, and I think that's a very important insight and symbol of what real teaching is, in fact.
I certainly agree with that. The image of the midwife is something that I take as inspiration for my own teaching method.
Mm.
Yeah, I'd like to maybe bring out what Plutarch said about school. This has always stuck with me. That the mind is not a vessel to be filled, but a fire to be kindled.
I like
So
that.
yeah, so as a teacher, I need to know that the student or the pupil that's in front of me must come to life.
And I think we can reinterpret that if we introduce some Buber, Martin Buber.
I was waiting for you to bring Boober up.
Oh, I planned on bringing it from the very beginning.
You always have something up your sleeve.
Oh, I did. The whole point of why I wanted to talk about education was so I can talk about Buber and education.
Let me make one more biblical reference, because the Bible is where we should continue to be looking. But yeah, we can certainly go to Buber. The book of Ecclesiastes, for everyone that's interested, the book of Ecclesiastes is written in a Socratic way, or even Job is written in a Socratic way. Why? Because it's asking questions of you as you're reading it, right? What good is this to man? What is the good life? What should I do? Right. And that's I just wanted to say that because we don't often read the Bible like that. I mean, so there are teaching modalities in scripture that you could see. And also, I think that's why Buber is such a phenomenal teacher, because he was a proper Bible scholar himself. So,
Yeah. So Buber. The thing.
well, yeah, I was going to say, Jimmer, just real fast. Buber would just one anecdote about Buber.
All right.
You would go to his house, sit down in his study, and he'd be there sitting down, and he would just like look at you for like 30 minutes without saying anything. And this has been corroborated from a lot of his students.
That's hilarious.
Sorry, I just wanted to share that. I love that little anecdote about him.
That is funny. You just walk in, you sit down, and he just stares at you for half an hour.
Yeah, he's letting the silence build.
That's funny. I've done that before, but only for a few minutes, not 30. I guess I need to up my game. All right. So Monday morning, Charles, I'm just going to stare at you for 30 minutes. It's coming.
Make it Tuesday because I'm going on the field trip. So
Really?
yeah.
Have to wait till Tuesday now?
Thank you in advance for subbing for me.
I don't know about that.
No, I'm just joking.
If I have to sub for your class, I'll probably just pull out some wizard math.
Give him a delicious problem. You were going to say something about Buber.
Yeah. The thing that Buber brings out. So he wrote the book I and Thou. And the whole premise of the book is we relate to reality through two modalities, an I-you relation and an I-it relation. And this isn't restricted to just people, but it could be trees, rocks, flowers, animals, whatever. Everything can be approached either through a it or a you relation. And you encounter reality in its fullness when you approach it or encounter it in this I-you modality. And you lose sight of that reality if you only live within this realm of I and it. And when we take this idea of I and you and apply it to education, Education is about recognizing that the student is a person. You need to approach that person as a you. When we educate them, we have to take seriously that personhood. When we don't, we truncate that personhood. We truncate their personal being and treat them as just a mere it. Education begins with this primordial I and thou relating. In order to get help the student bring to birth the truth, that requires the I and thou encounter. And when we as educators fail to do that, then it's because we are not living up to that vocation and striving to live in that modality of I and thou. In contrast, the propagandists, the propagandizers, the ones who promote propaganda, who try to indoctrinate their students, treat their students as mere things, as mere its, as objects to be used for their own purposes. And so when you enter education, this I and it modality, and treat the students as your own tools for propaganda, you make yourself as nothing more than a mere tool. You yourself are a mere it. It's dehumanizing of the students and of yourself, because both ways you have this um reduction to mere it status. What I believe we're seeing today with the industrial model is the problem of inherently just treating students as mere its, as cogs of the machine for mass production, and to perpetuate this it society instead of a you society. So that's the boober I wanted to mention. It's a he talks about it in a couple of essays in a small book called The Knowledge of Man. It's a really good book.
Sure. It's been on the bookshelf for a while. I need to read it. Sorry, Guillermo, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask for, and it's, I think for anyone who has kids in public school, it's clear what kind of propaganda is just rampant in the education system, and maybe not exclusively public schools. Like as I well, I'll go ahead and I'll allude to some Catholic schools. A lot of Catholic schools have fallen prey to the mainstream propaganda, shall we say?
Sure. I think it's more than just simply a problem of propaganda. When we go back to the kind of culture of mediocrity, um, like when I lived in Alabama, I was in Montgomery, and the state threatened to pull the teaching credentials of the entire public school district there because their school sucked so bad. Because they had fights like every day in the schools. Very few students were passing their classes. There was lots of problems with drugs, alcohol, um, just premarital sex, you name it, STDs, the whole nine yards.
That's
The
horrible.
situation was so bad that the state had sent in inspectors to determine whether they're going to revoke credentials. And that's far away, Montgomery, but we see something like that in San Antonio too, because there's you get these high schools here where, yeah, kids are having fights every day. You have teachers that just given up on certain demographics of students. In public schools, there's this thing called the achievement gap, right? Students of
Yeah.
color perform far less than white students when it comes to subjects such as engineering, mathematics, and science. Part of it is they live in poor areas, and so the schools are underfunded. Possibly. I don't really buy that myself
Me
because
either.
the school I'm at, it is a underfunded school because we get less money per student than the district schools by $1,500, and yet our school closed the achievement gap. So that's something powerful right there.
Mhm.
And that just goes to show what Charles talked about, the power behind a classical education does. Because with less money, we ended a problem in society, the achievement gap with our school.
Don't forget what the liberal arts do as you take it is, I mean, I think people just don't take liberal arts serious anymore. They don't.
With
First of all,
reason.
what's that?
With reason. I didn't take liberal arts seriously because when I was in high school, you could say anything you want and get an A.
Well, I guess what I what I meant was the serious liberal arts, like the real liberal arts. You know, those arts that, as we've been talking about, the things that free the mind.
So you mean engineering, physics.
I do not mean STEM at all. Although, look, I mean, I think that you could sort of teach STEM in a liberal way, right? In a free way, again, by through conversations and shared inquiry.
Oh, certainly.
But serious liberal arts, the things that free the mind from what? From socioeconomic identity, from racial identity, from any, again, social identity, and any label that is put on a student or a pupil or someone. The liberal arts frees you from that so that you could actually become who you're meant to be, not just a widget, not just a product, not just a data point, right? That you will become a flourishing human being and fulfill that which dignifies you.
Exactly. Exactly.
In other words, you become who you actually are, not who the group expects you to be.
It frees you from groupthink. Yes,
I love it.
precisely.
I
Or
love
Precisely.
even
it.
better, it makes you more of a person.
It makes you more of a person. Absolutely.
You fulfill your personhood
There we
more,
go.
your
Okay,
personal
that's better.
dignity.
That's right. And you're not molded by whatever's fashionable at the time or whatever, is pop in culture at the time. It frees you from the spirit of the time, right? The zeitgeist, if you like. You are able to, instead of be molded, you are able to mold yourself, right?
Right.
So no, I was coming from I guess more of a social political angle. I know that's not exclusively what's wrong with the system. No, what's wrong is, as you said, Jeremy, the culture of mediocrity. All right, no, that does make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And
And
if
go ahead, Guillermo.
yeah, just I just wanted to mention that I read this book by Catholic speaker Matthew Kelly. When I first read it, he was very critical about Catholic schools. And I couldn't understand why at first until just having um, interacted within the archdiocese where I'm at. And well, yes, I do want to, of course, say that there's social politically, it's gone down a path that it was that no school should ever go down. But at the same time, of course, uh, these schools as well have also fallen susceptible to the culture of mediocrity. So it's not exclusively a public school system either.
Right. Yeah. I was teaching at a Catholic high school in Alabama,
Hmm.
and I part of the reason why I left, well, large part of it was I just hated living in Montgomery. I really did not like the city or its culture. But another part of it was here I am teaching at a school, and I can't see myself sending my kids to it. I mean, the theology classes
Really?
were good. A lot of the teachers were great, but there was just something about the school that I felt was deficient, and so I couldn't justify spending several $1,000s to send my kids to it. And what was missing was a classical education, because what I wanted for my kids when they is to have their mind formed in great literature. And so my plan was if I was to stay in Alabama, I was going to homeschool my kids actually.
All right.
Again, it goes back to curriculum.
Yeah.
What's the content? It
What's
goes
the
back.
content?
It goes back to the method, right? How are we teaching? Through questioning. We are acknowledging the dignity of the students. For a teacher to ask a question is to give the floor to the student, give them the microphone, put the camera on them for a minute and let them become who they're supposed to be. And ultimately, I'll just say this there's one more quote, and I might bring up Strauss a whole lot because I really really enjoy reading Leo Strauss and thinking about what some of the things that he had brought to the discourse in classics and great books, and also liberal arts. But he always said that a teacher should enter into a classroom knowing that his superior, that there is a student in there that is superior to him, both in heart and in mind. And so if you take that approach into the classroom, that, I don't know, humility or something like that, like it permeates, and the kids know it. And you could tell pretty quickly from the rapport you get from them. But maybe that's too granular. But I certainly agree, Jeremy, that there's a lot of schools I would never send my kids to because that approach is just so tragic.
Yeah, no. I really like how you brought up that Strauss with humility. It goes back to this worldview of interacting with reality in terms of I and you versus I and it. When we interact with the world in humility, we're given a due respect and reverence towards reality and the things we encounter. And that is at heart what this I and you relating is all about, is being given a reverence to reality and towards others, whether it's an animal or a person, their due respect. There's a justice towards education. And when we do not acknowledge that, we perpetuate a injustice, and we're seeing the ramifications of a society-wide injustice through a lot of the public schools. I didn't catch that, Charles.
I said absolutely.
All right. And well, here's where we're at. And let's go ahead. And I know the three of us, and maybe any other educators tuning in right now, let's fulfill our vocation as educators and really just use our talents to serve our students that they may come to the truth. What came to mind a couple of topics ago was the quote by Jesus himself, "Let the children come to me, for to such is the kingdom of heaven." Right?
Yeah, that's a great quote.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Before we wrap up the episode, I do want to say that to all the parents out there,
Mm,
just know there are more options than just a public school. Like Charles and I, we both teach at a public charter school that has a classical education curriculum. So there are private schools, of course, but there are also charter schools that are very good. In fact, I am sending my oldest to the school I work for next school year because I believe in their mission, their teaching philosophy, pedagogy, and of course the curriculum. Just keep in mind that there are options out there. Um, there are organizations such as Thales, which I forget if it's North or South Carolina. There's Great Hearts, they're out in Texas, Arizona, even Florida and Louisiana now, I believe. They're just growing. And there are others as well. I know in the Diocese of Wichita, they're supposed to have one of the best Catholic school systems in the US. And if I recall correctly, it's actually free for Catholics, which is quite surprising, but also says how seriously they take their education over there. So I just want to let all the parents know that are listening to this, there are options out there other than the traditional class or other than the traditional school district. I know in the bigger cities, you have the more options than in the smaller towns. If you're interested in homeschooling, I know Ignatius Press has a couple books on it. I don't remember offhand what they are though, but I'm sure you can find them on Amazon or Ignatius website. Again, Ignatius Press has a couple books on homeschooling.
Yeah, there's also, I'm gonna just plug in one organization that I discovered a long time ago, maybe in 2015 or 16 when I was starting my nonprofit that was about Socratic seminars in the lower income parts of the city. The Angelicum Academy online. They are a very sort of classical liberal arts based home education kind of program that sends out materials that that are properly great books. And so if someone's interested in doing great books, homeschool, the Angelicum Academy is what to look for online. They have some really good material and content.
All right, Guillermo.
no, yeah, I'll just go ahead and also share that certainly in the Catholic school system, some Catholic schools are better than others. There's quite a few good ones in Los Angeles, very few, but there are. And also, um, homeschooling is certainly an option that there's very good sources out there. None that I'm familiar with, unfortunately, but that's something that I hear very favorably of, especially today. But all right. Well, yep. To wrap up our episode, do you guys have any parent intentions?
Um, I guess just general intentions for all educators.
Absolutely,
You
absolutely.
these are still some crazy times for COVID, depending on what state you live in. Um, for our mission, our website, for its growth. Charles?
Yeah, I'd love for everyone to keep my wife in their thoughts and prayers as she's nearing the birth of our fifth child. Um, you know, she's not a spring chicken anymore, unfortunately. So we're all getting a bit older, and to bring life into this world is is a beautiful thing, but it's also a laborious thing. So pray for us that we do not despair as we get close to that.
Excellent. Um, any specific intentions off the top of my head? I don't. Certainly, generally for all educators out there. Yep.
Absolutely. And keep the faith. If you're a teacher, we're on the front lines.
Yeah, we are.
Keep the faith. Stay strong.
Absolutely.
And show up every day for your students. They love you. You know what I mean? They'll never tell you that, but some might, but they really love you. And it's good to remember that.
Yeah. You never know how you affect someone until years later.
Definitely.
Our craft is the craft of love.
Yes, yes, absolutely. All right. All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And God bless. We bid you adieu.
Oh, you want to say goodbye or something?